It's good to see we've already got a few people arriving. So somebody's actually hit the record button, so I'm not quite sure. Did you do that, Amy?
Yeah, I did. Sorry, I didn't know if I was supposed to or not, but
you weren't. Well, everybody, it looks like we've already started recording the webinar, so this week we're going to be covering PR techniques. So while we're waiting for it to start, what we'll do is we will do some polls. I'm just going to wait for a few more people to arrive in the room first of all. So please leave a message in the chat. Please say hi, and let me know if you can hear us okay. You framed me completely. That's what Tom did last week. So yeah, it's really confusing because I'd normally start from scratch at 9 o'clock. Anyway, so apologies everybody who sees the video. You're going to see a bit of a muddled start while we just waste 2 minutes and get to 9 o'clock while we wait for a few more people to arrive. So the plan for today is that Amy's going to go through and talk about PR techniques. Hi Vanessa, good to see you. Sarah Ross is on the call as well, which is great. So she may well be able to answer any questions. I've actually physically got to go to another meeting and hopefully will join at 5 too. So while we're waiting for everybody else to arrive, what I'll do is I'll start, I'll put the first poll up and then we'll read the answers out. So you should be able to click on it now. So Amy, if you can let me know if you can actually answer the poll. I'm just going to restart then, guys. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this Friday's webinar. We've started recording accidentally early, so sorry about that, everybody. Lots of people have now arrived. So what I'm going to do, you should see a poll on the screen. I'm going to read the poll out so it appears in the video. So do you or your company carry out PR? So the first answer is no, I'm just learning or I'm trying to secure the resources. No, but I'm responsible for somebody that does do PR. Yes, I'm responsible for PR myself. Yes, there is a team responsible for PR. Yes, we use an external freelancer agency to do PR for us. Yes, I am a freelancer or work for an agency that does PR for other businesses. Now, you should be able to click on more than one of those answers. And at the moment, it's just under 50% are just learning or just starting. So they haven't got resources. And then about, it's actually pretty even split between those two at the moment. We are still waiting for a few more people to arrive. So hopefully the new people as you're arriving, if you could answer the poll, you should be able to see that on the screen. We've got about 45% say no, I'm just learning. 31% say I'm responsible for myself. And then there's a few of you that are part of the team. So it looks like you've got quite a lot of newbies today, which is really interesting. So I'm going to go back to the queue and do a second poll. And this, I suppose, really applies mainly to the people that have already got PR in place or are trying to do some of it themselves. But you should see that question now. Do you have a crisis plan in place or need any help with this? So a crisis plan, quick definition, Amy, what would you say?
It's being proactive. It's looking for all the things that maybe could happen and having a strategy and plan around it to ensure that you can cope with anything that happens from a sort of nuclear fallout to the pandemic. So it's covering all bases really and knowing what you're going to do about it.
Excellent. So no, this is not applicable to our business. No, we're not doing PR yet. No, but we need it is most popular answer. That's currently 36 to 40%. Yes, we're working on one. Yes, we have one. So there's about a quarter of the people do have one. I'm guessing that's going to be the same people that are doing PR themselves. We need some help to create one. So there's just a couple of people there. So it looks like we've got a good number of people in the room. So what we'll do now is we'll quickly pass over to Amy, who will start the presentation, and I will see you hopefully towards the end. Good luck, Amy. Bye.
Thank you. See you, Anne. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for coming along today. So today we're looking at some PR techniques around creating and maintaining a positive reputation. And this covers the following. So we're going to define PR. So we're going to look at actually what PR is. I know that a lot of you from the poll are actually working in PR, but I think it's useful to kind of touch base and sort of understand exactly what PR is and how it works. We're going to look at why reputation matters, and reputation is a really important element, a kind of a key element of PR. So we're going to be looking at that in a bit more detail. We're then going to be looking at how you can avoid an issue, what an issue is, and what you can do to kind of manage an issue. And finally, we're looking at crisis management. And obviously, from the poll, it looks like a lot of you are very interested in what crisis management is and how to actually define a plan. So we're going to go into that in a bit more detail. I've got my coffee. I hope you've got a coffee as well. Take a quick slurp. Okay. Be quite interesting for you to know a bit more about me, where I come from. Obviously, I work at Annika. I've got 20 years comms experience, and I've worked from big brands from Waitrose, worked in the head office looking after corporate communications, where I was heavily involved in crisis management and issues management. I worked in agriculture and food, which both bring up their own issues and things you can't plan for. So I've got huge amounts of experience within sort of reputation management from that area, from a kind of FMCG background. But also I've worked in the B2B arena as well, which again has its own issues that you have to deal with. No business comes without issues or potential crisis as well. You can use the model to kind of span all areas, and we'll look at that in a bit more detail with some examples and case studies. So I've got around 20 years experience and worked in agencies as well as in-house. I'm head of owned and earned media at Annika. I joined the business in February, so I'm still relatively new, but absolutely loving it. We've got a great team of content and PR experts. I'm responsible for PR strategy and outreach. What we do is look to create newsworthy and engaging copy for our clients. We plan content, we look at where there are content gaps, how we can get the most value for our clients and brands that we work with. Part of that is managing reputation and their sort of own reputation management. So we'll be looking at any sort of potential issues that they might be coming across, or plan or support planning for crisis. And as well as working within content, we obviously, because of the nature of our role within Annika, we do work very closely with the wider Annika team. So whether that's across the paid team for paid social media, because we might be producing organic posts as part of our content outreach. A lot of our work is developed through analytics, so we'll work with Ed's team through looking at analytics and statistics, can't speak, and planning and strategy with Tom. And although I've worked all around the country, like, as I say, Waitrose down in Berkshire, I'm actually from the East Midlands. I'm actually a farmer's daughter, lived and grew up on a farm when I was younger, and come back to the East Midlands. I still love the outdoors, and there's a picture of me. That was during like the first lockdown, and discovered this amazing lake in Leicestershire with my dog and one of my friends, but socially distant walk. So yes, so when I'm not working for Annika, I'm always sort of outside thinking of plans for Annika. Okay, so a little bit about Annika. I'm sure if you attend our webinars, you are up to speed on what we do. But we work with a broad range of businesses, many of them in the manufacturing or building their own products. We have huge amounts of knowledge. A lot of our team have been here for many years and know those industries inside out, and really understand the sort of sectors and arenas that those businesses operate in. And we've got a number of awards to recognise the achievements we've made with those businesses over the years. Okay. So I thought it'd be interesting or useful to start off with what is PR. Obviously, a lot of you are working within this area, but it's useful just to understand exactly what that is. So the CIPR, which is like the UK kind of national body of PR people, so it's Chartered Institute of Public Relations, their definition of PR is that it is the planned and sustained effort to establish and maintain goodwill and mutual understanding between an organisation and its publics. I think it's always really useful to just keep this front of mind, because there's so much going on when you've got a PR role, but this really this sums up everything that PR is, and this is the definition I learnt when I went to uni, studied PR quite a few years ago. It's not changed because it's so robust, and it really does say what PR does. PR is fundamentally about reputation. It's the result of what you do, what you're saying, and what others importantly are saying about you. And with PR, you can shape that. You can shape people's response. You can actually put some things in place to shape what they're thinking and how people are going to be talking or writing or blogging or posting on social media about you. It's a discipline. It's certainly an art. We do it to understand and support and influence opinions and behaviours. As I said, it's very important that you have planned outreach, because you need to understand how you want to shape that behaviour. You need to understand with PR what you're actually looking to achieve, and PR is the route to do that. So we'll look at that in a bit more detail with some examples as well. So PR helps you get your message to the right people and at the right time. I think you can look at Twitter, for example, and you'll see so many journalists just firing their messages out all the time. Is that the right thing to do? It's not planned necessarily. It's very much off the cuff. PR can be very reactive, yes, but in the main it's proactive, and it's planned, and messages are sent out at a certain time to reach an audience at the right time. You don't want to, obviously, if you're launching a product, for example, you wouldn't want to announce it before the timing is right, before you've got your collateral in place, before you're actually ready to go. So it sounds very basic, but actually it's really important because there's so much around it in terms of your messaging and the materials you might produce and the kind of wider concepts around what your activity is doing. With that as well, you have to define who you're sending that message to. Is it a journalist? Actually, are you going to approach them on Twitter because that's where they are and that's where they're active? Is it a stakeholder? Is it a third-party stakeholder? Are you doing some financial results and you need to get that information into the hands of investors? So it's a different audience again. So you have to be very clear about what your message is, who it's going to, and if it might change as well according to who you're communicating with. So the message you put out on Twitter to that journalist is going to be short and snappy, 280 characters. But the information you're sending to your stakeholders is probably going to be a big briefing pack with lots of Q&As, and you'll be presenting spokesperson opportunities. So fundamentally, you're going to be tweaking things to make sure you're reaching and engaging that audience, sort of ticking their box for what they want to hear and at the right time. With anything, we want to generate positive sentiment, enhance reputation, and reach that audience. It can be used to maintain awareness and monitor those issues, and obviously we're talking about that. It's important that when you are developing and pushing a campaign out, you're aware of the potential pitfalls as well. What will your competitors say? What will they come back with? If you're McDonald's, you've got to be prepared for Burger King to come right back at you, so what are those things that you've got to plan for when you're actually looking to push your campaign out? So negativity is something you need to think about. It needs to be built into your own strategy in terms of how you might manage any negativity. If you send something out that's got errors in the spelling or the grammar, that could be picked up as much as criticism around what you're actually doing, what your message is. So you've got to think around sort of all bases with that. So I mentioned that I'm head of owned and earned media, and just to kind of clarify really what that is, owned comms come from your business. They are what you produce. That's your message. That's what you are sending out. So whether it's something you're posting on social, it's the press release you've written, the blog post you've written, the content you've put on your website, videos you've produced and put onto YouTube or any other video channel, that's done by you, and that helps you build your reputation. The materials you are producing are there, and what you're doing is there to shape and build your reputation as a business or brand. In terms of earned, it's all the stuff you're sending out. What are people going to do with it? That's a result of what you're doing. So it's the coverage you're getting from your press release. It's what those thought leaders or influencers are going to be saying about you on reading that information. It's going to be the number of people who are liking, sharing, or engaging with your social media posts. It's going to generate potentially reviews, testimonials, and feedback. So it's kind of sentiment around the collateral that you're producing. So obviously both work hand in hand. There's loads of different techniques and things that we can use to shape the sentiment and to get really positive results from what you're going to earn. But sometimes, you know, there are issues, and sometimes there are reputational issues you've got to look at, and there are moments of crisis. So we're going to look at those because it's all of those elements really impact on your own reputation. So you can see here how the two are joined and work hand in hand. So what is reputation management? So it refers to the influencing and the concealing of an individual's or group's reputation. So it's what people are saying about you, what you're pushing out, what you're portraying. And, you know, it's no longer measured in column inches. No one's running out to buy, you know, a sort of tabloid or broadsheet every day. They're going onto Twitter to get their news. They are reading stuff online. People haven't got time to do that necessarily. You know, you don't, when you measure PR, you don't literally look at how much column inches you've got. You're looking elsewhere, you're looking at digital as well now. And that is why your reputation is so important, because digital is so quick and fast paced. We all hear the words, wow, it's gone viral. Well, yeah, you can go viral very negatively as well as being a positive thing, because it's so quick, and it's really hard to then manage if something negative gets out. So measuring your online reputation is probably more important than those kind of column inches. And that's through social, online, sort of blogs and articles you might find online, and any kind of reviews you might see. Like think TripAdvisor, for example. In terms of the process for reputation management, one is about measuring. So what is your audience saying about you? Do you actually know? You know, have you actually sat down and gone, okay, what are people saying about us? Have we actually gone and looked and listened and heard what people think? How do you know they're thinking that? Are they being influenced by someone else or a different brand? Is one of your competitors putting information out there about you, or are they saying things about a sort of launch that you've done, or saying something about a similar product that you both have? Is there any way that you can change that? What can you do to shape and influence that? It's really important, this stage. Measurement is a theme throughout this whole presentation, and measurement is something you need to do at the beginning, during, and end of any campaign, because you need to sometimes tweak your messaging if it's not landing, if it's not hitting, if it's not resonating, if it's not earning those great results. You need to tweak it, but you have to measure it to know that. And with reputation, you really need to understand what people are saying about you, how you're perceived by your audience, by your publics, before you can actually change that opinion or shape it or manage any issues. The second approach is about responding. So what you can do, what are you going to do to shape and change it? And, you know, what will this change? How is that change going to affect itself? I mentioned TripAdvisor earlier, and it is a great way of actually looking. And I think online as well, if we're shopping, we often look at reviews of products. How does that shoe fit really? Or, you know, what is the colour actually like of this item? We do rely on reviews more and more and more. So it's a great way to actually measure what your reputation is. So in terms of monitoring, you can use a number of different monitoring tools to understand what's being said. So for social media, there's things like Hootsuite, and others are available, like Sprout Social, for example, monitoring sentiment, frequency, reach, and understanding what's being really said about you and your brand. But it is, you know, it's dependent, what you use is dependent on your business and which audience you're targeting. So, for example, I think all of us use Google Analytics, and you can see from that where most people are, which pages people are going to, for example, on your website. So again, that's going to shape what people are hearing about you, where they're going, and you can perhaps influence that by putting different content on those pages that they're going to. So I just used Argos here as an example of what people are saying, because they're really quite good at social media, actually. And if you go on, there's quite a few examples, both from online news sources, Trustpilot, which is a well-known review site, and actually a great tweet by someone who used the service recently. So there's a range of different areas here that Argos can use to listen to what people are saying. So they can look at reviews, they can look at what's being said in the media, and they'll be looking at their social media feed, and this is Twitter, for their measuring tools. In terms of responding, for general reputation management, you need to just have a plan in place around who might be responsible for getting messages out there, making sure you have a consistent and smooth delivery of your messaging. So it could be that your CS team or customer services team do quite a lot of that responding, because it's kind of day to day, hey, I can't find this product online. You know, that's something that the PR team doesn't need to answer. Your customer service team are well versed in kind of knowing the answers to those questions and can quickly respond. They will need training if your teams are not, your sort of social media team are responding on social, but generally your customer service team can do a lot of kind of day-to-day query management, saving you time to think about crisis management potentially, or other PR activities. Yes, marketing and PR teams will have a responsibility as well in terms of responding to questions and queries, and mainly on building that reputation up. That's mainly what they are looking to do. It might be that you have a head of department or one of your business leaders who is responsible for responding or shaping your messaging. It does depend on your size of your business, how hands-on people are, what functions they have, how much time they have. There might also be designated spokespeople for different areas of the business. So, for example, you've got an engineering firm and you might want a specialist engineer to be able to communicate with very technical queries that an engineer has. So it just depends on who's asking the question and what level of detail you need to give back, but it's good to have that planned. So you are consistent, you can be proactive, it's seamless. You don't want to suddenly get to a situation with general PR and managing your reputation. You're always having to firefight, you're always having to react. If you've got a plan in place, you know who, the right person's going to speak, they can quickly get engaged and quickly be speaking to that audience. It might be they're using prepared statements or have sound bites ready. There might be social media posts they have as standard. I would say that the worst thing is to go on social media and to see the same message all the time. Hey, we're sorry to hear that, we'll get back to you. And you kind of think, yeah, you said that, 5 tweets ago. So it's not really real. So there's ways of doing it, certainly, and you perhaps need to look at that, depending on the level of queries you get. You can obviously use chatbots to kind of support, but I think quickly some personal interaction for some of the big issues that you need to take offline maybe are quite important. So this is an example of one, again, through Twitter for Argos. And they use quite a personal message here. And they've also put their name against the message. Clem might not actually be Clem, but it's useful from Argos's point of view to understand the chain of communication with these things, and to then you can work out who's saying what and how complaints or issues are being dealt with if they're named. But they have also, and I know it says Sainsbury's, but Argos is now owned by Sainsbury's. But there's contact information on their site as well. So they've made it really easy for people to get in touch, both through both of their specific Twitter accounts for helpline questions, and also if you're a member of the press, you can go online, or you can go and call or contact the Sainsbury's Care line. So they're trying to make it easy for you. So they're being proactive. So that's a good example of how they're being proactive and how they're managing their reputation in that way. I think many of us might remember this Martin Bashir interview with Princess of Wales, and certainly it's become a real issue recently. The reputation of Martin Bashir has gone is in tatters, really, based on the fact it was found that he used deceit to get the interview with the Princess of Wales. And it's recently, in the last week, has completely blown up. I know it's a kind of a national press example and for an individual, but it's quite interesting to just illustrate how his reputation is now really damaged. So hopefully some of you would have seen or understood some of these things that have been going on in the press. And it's not just in the garden, it's been worldwide, to the point where Princess Diana's son has, spoken publicly about this. The BBC has come under huge scrutiny following the revelation that Martin Bashir used, he was lying to get some of this information and secure this interview. And I literally Googled BBC reputation, and there were so many articles and so many sound bites around it. So it just shows how damaging what he has done has been now to the BBC. And it's become an issue. And I would say almost it's a crisis for them, because, people are now saying, well, why am I going to pay my money to the licence fee? But this started off as a reputational issue, and you can see how very quickly it can actually escalate. So if they'd managed this reputation and been clear about his position and what he was doing, this wouldn't have happened. We even have a comment here from the Home Secretary talking about what the BBC has to do in terms of gaining trust and confidence. So it's very interesting in terms, and I think it'll be an interesting one to see played out as well in terms of how the BBC regains its reputation in the back of this, because it's certainly really knocked them. And some more coverage here. And I put this down as an opposite. So reputation of our home team, Leicester City, who won the FA Cup, their reputation has really increased, in particular their manager, who actually had a bit of a tarnished reputation in terms of football circles, apparently. And apparently, now everyone's kind of cheering from the rooftops about how well he's done. And obviously, this great squad have achieved their first ever FA Cup win. So that's just an example of, really positive reputation, and that's not just local to Leicester, but obviously UK-wide. People know how great they're doing. And this is an example that Anne and I were talking about just recently. It's the whole concept of fame versus reputation. And this has been quite widely pushed around on Twitter. I was talking to my team about it yesterday, and everyone's like, yeah, I've seen this. So basically, this is a picture of Kendall Jenner in a swimsuit, standing there, obviously all airbrushed and looking whatever, perhaps a bit like a Barbie, against the photograph of Alyssa Carson. She's a 19-year-old female astronaut who's the youngest person in history to go into space. But who knows the astronaut, and who knows Kendall Jenner? I think we all know Kendall Jenner and the Kardashians more than this fantastically amazing girl who's gone into space. So when Anne and I were talking about it, we're talking around the sort of cult of personality, the fame versus reputation argument, where now people who are more known for sort of what they look like than what they actually are saying. And it's not just that it's happening within the celebrity world, it's actually really filtering down into business now as well. So, what you're saying on LinkedIn, how is that influencing? How is that shaping or showing your reputation off? Think about programs like The Apprentice and the reputation of those people that are on that show. So are they doing it to actually get a deal with Lord Sugar, or are they really doing this to get a few column inches? I think the lines are quite blurred now. So thanks, Anne, that was a good discussion we had around that. So I've got a bit of an action sheet here to finish off the reputation section. So what can you do? Ask people to review your products and services to kind of build reputation online, and sort of post those really positive ones onto your site. Turn any positive reviews into larger case studies. That's a really great way of kind of shaping and building that positive reputation as well. Equally, third-party blogs on your site are a really good way of highlighting a good product or service. And obviously you've got that third-party credibility, which is what we're looking for in PR. And look and seek out opportunities to kind of add an opinion or speak up or comment. to kind of build that positive reputation of your business. So, but I think most of all, it's about maintaining strong messaging. It's about being, looking at good opportunities and keeping your comms positive. But what happens when it's not so positive and there's a few issues? So the definition of issue management is that it's the process of identifying and resolving issues. It helps businesses to respond appropriately to emerging trends or changes. So like reputation management, it is about being proactive, not about being reactive. So we saw here a picture of plastic waste floating in the ocean. I think we're all shocked to the core when we learned the damage that plastic bags were doing to our wider environment. And it's businesses like Morrison's who just quietly moved away from giving out plastic bags to giving out paper bags. I remember when I was working at Waitrose, we never gave out plastic bags. We always, this is before kind of this happened, but customers had to ask for them. There was already quietly some work being done behind the scenes in terms of plastic waste. And now, of course, we've got the 10p levy on plastic bags. But there were steps being taken, before to actually change and shape and manage the issue, to be proactive rather than being told by the government, you've got to stop using plastic bags. Businesses have, in some cases, said, okay, we'll use paper, or we'll charge, or we'll, they'll take different steps. They're being proactive in managing that. So just one example of how you can do it. So the process used is around identifying a potential issue. So what might that be? What might happen, and what can you kind of do about it? You would categorize it. Is it a high or low risk? Is it something we can do very quickly? Or actually, does it take a lot more time and planning? Is it really critical, business critical? Understand your business position around an issue as well. Are you joined up? Are you joined up with what your MD is going to say about it? If not, you all should be. So that's really important as well. So understanding your brand or business position around an issue. Are you all going to be in favour of paper bags? If not, why not? Let's think about that and get some messaging around it and get a conclusion on what your messaging is going to be. Creating a response once you've got that information from your teams and worked out what those issues are. Monitor and measuring again, that's key in terms of understanding where the position is and whether you need to refine or redefine your messaging, and sort of finally promoting trust and credibility to increase any positive sentiment around an issue. So if you're still giving out plastic bags and you've got some negativity, it might not be a crisis, but it's an issue you've got to manage. So what are you going to do to kind of show that you're more credible? It could be that you suddenly invest in some sort of environmentally friendly gardening schemes or local schools to kind of show that you've got really good green ethos, for example. So that's a kind of example of how you might build credibility, and that would be in a local environment, but there's things you could do nationally as well. We've created a process map here, and although they're numbered, measurement really for me goes into each area. And actually I'll talk about measurement first in the next slide, because it's important to be able to define where you are before you can identify issues as well. But measurement also comes at the end process to see how effective you've been. So what's your audience thinking about you? How do you know it? Is it influence? Can you change it? It's what we looked at before in terms of the kind of core areas of measurement. And obviously you'll be doing that dependent on the platforms you're looking at, whether it's looking on social, whether you're looking at it from a PR perspective, whether you're looking at it from a reviews and testimonials perspective. So it depends on the area that your outreach is going on to as to how you're measuring it. So you need to take steps to understand how you're perceived before you can change opinion, because you might have one idea and think, my brand's fantastic and everything thinks we're great, but have you actually read the reviews? Are you missing something? So you need to understand what that is before you can actually shape and change opinion. Identifying potential issues is all around auditing and assessing every possible issue for every part of your business. Your business might have an HR department, finance, product development, communications. All those will come with their own issues, which can be something that could be more negative externally. There might be some issues within the HR department that you need to manage that might throw themselves out. The fact that there's not a kind of, inclusive hiring policy. So you need to look at all the areas of all the business so you can manage and understand what they are so they don't turn into a crisis. How do you do that internally? You can get feedback from staff. I think actually it's a really good idea to kind of have a round table from departments to understand what issues they might be facing, how that might affect your business and how it might affect the reputation of the business, because there might be things going on that you perhaps don't know about. For example, there needs to be kind of ongoing processes. But I would certainly suggest from an issues management perspective, this is almost business as usual. Identifying and managing issues should be kind of something you do as standard, something that happens all the time so it doesn't become a crisis. So it's very much that proactive, not reactive approach. Categorise your issues from critical down to low, and obviously the priority or the critical ones, the ones that you would address first to stop them becoming a crisis issue. PR is the way that we would manage potential issues. We can help map out response processes and an action plan to manage any kind of potential issues, working with stakeholders and third parties to develop messages and review company policy and statements to make sure you have got that sort of robust, proactive comms. It's joined up and it's reflective of what the business is thinking and saying. What you can do as well is to explore different scenarios and make statements around those different scenarios, making sure you've got a sort of 360 outreach plan if needs be. So if there's an issue, are you going to be posting on social? Will you be posting on your site? How will you be communicating with stakeholders? So it's all sort of a wide approach and just looking at one kind of area. How are you going to do that? What does that look like? And you can signpost your communications as well through PR. You can do a tweet, for example, or post on Facebook saying, go online to read our full statement on. Instead of having to put the whole thing on social, you can just link to it. And obviously then you'll be able to measure how effective those channels are as well through analytics. And monitoring and measuring to make sure you're being effective, what you're doing is actually working, people are actually saying what they think. So you really want to create trust and credibility. I put John Lewis here as an example. I love the brand, work for them, yes, but I think they are always seen as a bellwether of kind of shopping and e-commerce and trading, and they are a well-respected business. That's why I use the example. But I, obviously did work for them. But I do think they are very much a kind of national kind of institution. People look to them for a strong reputation. I think it's important to understand whether you need to rebuild trust and credibility. It's something you need to question and you need to look at it, and that's a proactive way of kind of managing that. What can you do? What steps do you need to take to kind of make sure your issue is not going to become a crisis? You're maintaining a positive reputation. How are you going to communicate it? Is there internal communication you need to do as well as external? Often, not talking with employees can create more of an issue than not. You're perhaps doing things, you're pushing information out externally, but actually have you thought about talking to people internally and telling them what's going on? Because actually that can create negativity internally. And then if an employee gets really kind of disgruntled, that can lead to negative press coverage in some instances. So it's important that your communications, your plans, what you're doing is not only external, but communicated internally so that your internal publics know what you're doing, are kind of joined up, they're behind you. There might be some sort of ways you can kind of get people to kind of even self-promote. You can even have ambassadors internally that promote content on LinkedIn, and that goes a long way to building a business's reputation actually, and can go a long way to manage any potential issues as well. because it could be have employees posting about the fact that, hey, did you know we're using paper bags? This is really great. I love this. This is we really love this, and I can't wait to go and get my paper bags when I go shopping at the weekend. It just helps to reaffirm the message. So we move on to the final section, conscious of time, but this is quite a big section. And actually, Anne and I were talking earlier about it because it is so big. We're looking to do a further webinar on crisis management at another date later in the year, because there's quite a lot more to go on with crisis. And I know it's an area and topic that many of you are really interested in. You perhaps haven't got plans in place. And obviously you can talk to us about that if you want some help, but this definitely goes some way to kind of explain what crisis management is and how you can manage a crisis. And there's some strong examples here of recent crisis online and in the media as well. So, Mr. Trump, crisis management is designed to protect an individual, company and organisation facing a challenge to its reputation. Do you think you needed crisis management ever? Anyway, there's two clear, distinct types of crisis. There's known unknowns and unknown unknowns. So the first one is, okay, we know there's some stuff that could happen potentially around a product recall. You could be a food manufacturer and know that if I'm dealing with food, there's without a doubt at some stage, however much you plan, there might be an issue with one of your products. So potentially there could be a product issue or product recall. You might get really bad reviews or really poor customer service that can lead to real negativity. There could be an accident. These types of things are kind of much about when it will happen, not if. So you can pretty much plan for these awful things to happen, but at least you'll have a plan in place. Unknown unknowns. COVID-19. There was no one had any idea about this, and businesses have had to react, and it's caused massive damage, and there's been a massive crisis. The comms, that's another whole webinar as well around what's been happening with COVID-19 comms. But these are things you don't know are going to happen. For example, a malicious event, terrorism, war. They're all things that you wouldn't know are going to happen. It's reactive, unlike your reputation management protocols or how you're going to manage an issue. It is reactive, not proactive. It's unknown. So the PR objective of managing this is to prevent damage limitation. You need to protect your brand, and it has to be quick. You can't sit around and think, okay, yeah, we must do something about this. You have to be in a position to be able to respond quickly, clearly, and with plans in place. It's really important that you have an action plan. You need to work out what the known unknowns are. You need to assess likely critical issues, categorize what is deemed a crisis. Think about that triangle we had earlier. Look at this as critical each time, generally. But also within that, you could say, actually, although a negative review, for example, is a crisis for us, what is it on the scale of 1 to 10 against, say, an employee accident or a member of the public who had an accident in one of our shops, for example? So do categorise them. All should be taken with as much seriousness, but I think there are levels of importance in terms of the response as well, and different ways in which you'd be responding to those kind of examples. Assess how your business will cope or react. That's really important to understand what is there, what's in place for you to be able to manage this and how you go about it. You need to have a plan to put into place, and that plan needs to be ready. You can't just draw a plan up when the crisis happens. You need to have a blueprint. You need to have something ready to go. And obviously it can be tweaked. There might be changes you do need to make, but ultimately you do need to have a plan ready. And very importantly, you need to know who to contact internally and externally if a crisis happens, and make sure those details are up to date. People move house, people change their mobile number, people don't necessarily respond to an email, a work email on a Saturday night. How can you get hold of them? You may have someone, if you work in retail, you'll often, as a PR person, I know this very well, you'll often be on call over a weekend, and you'll have like a pool phone or something. And if a journalist phones you, and it always an issue, you have like the hotline number effectively, and you have a crib sheet, and you know who to contact when and where. And it could be everybody from the health and safety officer within the business to your MD. So having a contact sheet is really, really important. So there's 3 elements to have an effective crisis management plan. So what's the company policy for handling a crisis and emergency? Is the MD off, the weekend? Is he not contactable? Is she contactable? What's that? What does it look like? What's the policy, and what's their policy for handling it? You need to test your messaging and communication. If you're thinking if it's going to be a tech crisis, is your tech up to date? Have you got an IT expert on hand who can actually sort these issues out? Are they going to be working on a Saturday night? Can you contact them on Saturday night? Believe you me, issues happen on a Saturday night. It's not just Monday morning when everyone walks back into work. Most of the time it's the weekend. And working retail, when you're on call, you're pretty much working all weekend, just managing issues and potential crisis. You need to make sure your speakers, your key personnel are actually trained to speak to the press, are comfortable speaking to the press, and know what messaging to be communicating. And in fact, making sure those statements are also up to date as well, and they've got them to hand, and they do not know what they're saying, and they're going to be very clear on it. Monitoring and measuring again. How do you know there's a crisis? Use social listening to understand, to hear what's going on. If one business is having a crisis, if one business has got a product recall, do your products come from the same source? Is that something you need to know about? So monitoring all the time is really, really important. Understand what's being said, what the sentiment is against your brand, in the industry, around competitors. And, is there a predetermined measure you can put in place to understand whether it's a crisis and sort of how critical it is? How are you going to respond? The last thing you want to do in a crisis is bury your head in the sand and sit back and say, hey, it's Saturday. I don't want to respond to this. I'm busy. That creates more of an issue itself. Your crisis will get worse if you do not respond. You need to have and be able to communicate your predefined response plan, and you must ensure that all of your channels can be reached at the right time and by the right people and with the right statements. But you have to respond, even if it's a quick, I'm sorry, we don't know how this has happened, but we're doing everything we can. Or our concerns are with the member or the family. If there's been an accident, the person's family, we're doing everything we can to support them. But, you need to respond. You need to be seen to be communicating, to care. Put a human face on this. Don't just send out tweets. Get someone in front of the camera if they can. Just make sure they're trained and they know what they're saying. And you've approved it as a PR person. You've approved those statements. And importantly, make sure you follow up on those actions. There'll always be someone who says, you said you were going to do this, Mr. Councillor, but I've not seen it. That's just an example, because local government often gets called to account. But you need to make sure your business, organisational brand follows up on what it says and is seen to be proactively showing or sharing what they have done or you have done. It's really important. Time of crisis, people panic. It's scary. There's probably some really quite difficult things happening, and it's a scary time, and that can often lead to mixed messaging or mixed communication. So there does need to be very clearly defined steps in place and response procedures to make sure you have a clear and consistent message. By having that actually takes a lot of the panic away. If you can say, okay, I know I've got these statements, I know who I'm going to call, I know X is trained to speak, I know we've got our media contacts, this is what we're going to do. Everything else might be quite crazy, but at least you've got some things in place and you can start off in a sort of much calmer position. That's really, really important. Panic is that if you panic, you can't think. And you need to be clear, you need to be concise, you need to be communicating clearly. And take a breath. Okay, so what you must do, be clear on who your spokespeople or spokesperson is. Be clear on who's saying what and when. It might be there's different people in different parts of the business globally as well. I think sometimes we're not just thinking local or UK. It could be a global business. This fallout could affect people on a kind of wider scale. What's the timing of your statements? How are they going to be managed? And what does it look like? Really important to brief your wider team and staff. Talked about this earlier. Internal comms and communicating with your internal audience are really, really important. The last thing you want is disgruntled employees or people who are panicking, leaving and being tackled by the press outside the factory gate or the front door of the business, and then talking and saying things that you don't want them to say, or something negative, or mixed messaging, or just perhaps they don't understand and say something wrong. That's the soundbite. It's not the soundbite from your MD that's being carefully managed and planned. It's the soundbites from people that perhaps don't know the full story. So be really careful and communicate with those people. It might be that you have procedures and policies in place. Say, for example, around social media, you could ask your staff, please don't comment about this on social media. Wait for us to respond. We will be putting a statement out, and you may, please share that. But be clear to people, tell them, because if people know there's a guideline and they know what to do, they might be panicking as well. So just important to be very clear with them and make them feel reassured, make people feel reassured. Importantly, sign off statements and triple check for mistakes, and monitor and measure, see what's happening on social. Don't let it go viral. Monitor the news, monitor what's happening, monitor to see what influencers and bloggers are saying. So monitor who internally needs to know about it. Make sure you've got a plan in place and a delivery of that plan. Often you can have a task force in place. It could be that you have people represented from different parts of the business, namely, your sort of key stakeholders, key internal stakeholders. It could be your PR comms team, obviously, internal comms team. HR maybe. So think about all the people in the business who might need to be involved with this and have a sort of task force ready. You need to understand what the tactics are within that task force, what the approval process is within it, who's signing off, who's not, who's involved. Should there be 2 or 3 signatories on a document? You need to assess that and understand that ahead of these activities. When you respond, who is a designated spokesperson, and is that person then going to manage comms throughout the whole of the issue or crisis, or will there be different people at different times? Who are they? Have you got statements? Are you setting up interviews? What are you doing in terms of being proactive, like blogs or putting information on social media? So there's lots of different things to think about. I'm only just touching the surface here, which is why we want to look at this in a bit more detail another time, but it gives you a really good idea about how you would lay out your plan and how you'd look to do this. And measurement and monitoring is key to understand how this is playing out, and what people are saying about you, and hopefully you can turn it from a crisis into an issue, and then you can start to rebuild your reputation. So I put a quick, I know we're kind of short on time now, but in January 2013, there was a massive scandal because horse meat had been found in frozen burgers. It was burgers that were perhaps kind of less expensive. They were cheaper to buy in supermarket. They're frozen ones as well. When they were tested by authorities in Ireland and the UK, it was found that horse meat and in some cases pork had been found in the burgers. A couple of major issues here. One, some people for religious reasons don't eat pork, and you don't expect to find pork in your burger, and you might even be allergic to it. Secondly, horse meat is not a meat that you buy in the UK, and horses, when they're killed, sometimes, in their life, they will have drugs given to them that are actually make them unfit for human consumption. So there's like 3 critical issues here around this. And actually, the biggest one, but that weren't labelled correctly. So you're buying a product and you actually weren't buying a pork burger, you were buying a beef burger. So it was against trading standards. So it was a massive national issue. So it was a huge crisis for the industry. As a result of this, 6 in 10 consumers changed their shopping habits. 30% of consumers were buying less meat, and 24% choosing to buy veggie meals. And the trust fell by 24% against the industry. So huge fallout. It also led to a rise in organic sales. So the Sword Association stamp here kind of identifies you're buying an organic product. With the Sword Association reporting that sales increased by 8.4% in a year. And organic's now seen as a sign of integrity and quality on the back of that issue. And the NFU, which is the National Farmers Union, found that 78% of people wanted to find more British food in supermarkets. There's a massive trust issue because the meat that the original meat for these burgers was from abroad. I think it's from Romania. So it actually benefited British farmers because they were able to build up their trust and credibility reputation on the back of this. And there were lots of things that different supermarkets did. So Tesco promised to tighten up the supply chain and source British meat, and shoppers were sort of urged to use the red tractor logo as a kind of trust symbol and credibility symbol. And Tesco were quite proactive after this in terms of rebuilding their trust and credibility. They actually they hired someone from the National Farmers Union to restore public trust following the scandal, because they were doing everything they could to actually rebuild their credibility. I'm going to whiz these on you. I know you can download the slides afterwards, so you can have a look at some of the quotes I've put in here. But Morrison's was a brand that wasn't affected, but actually they started to do more proactive work around their supply chain. And also McDonald's was another business as well that really started to promote. And this is a clip from their website. There's a lot of information online about what they do in terms of their sourcing and how their products have full traceability. Because obviously selling burgers, they wanted to make sure there wasn't an issue for them. So they started to build their reputation up really proactively behind this. So it was really helpful to do for them. And so online, they've got a lot of information around food, where it comes from, traceability, what is in our burgers. It's quite a good place to have a look at their comms as well. They've got a really good PR team. And very recently, so I don't know if any of you tuned into Glastonbury live last weekend. Obviously, Glastonbury couldn't go ahead. It was another fallow year because of the pandemic. So they did a kind of live streamed event, or so it was going to happen. But then there was a massive issue because the live stream wasn't working. And there was a huge fallout on social media around it. And after the event, lots of press coverage, really negative press coverage around the fact that you couldn't actually stream the content. And the trouble was, the organiser didn't pick up on it. There was no communication from Worthy Farm, from Emily Evis, or the people who were actually doing the streaming. There was nothing in place. They hadn't thought about an unknown. You know, there was nothing set up in terms of responding or proactively managing the issue. So they got on top of this really quite late. So when Drift Live, for the people who were doing the streaming, found out about it, it was way after all the negativity had happened on social. There'd been nothing, no holding statements, no comment from Emily Evis on this until it was way too late. So this is an example of how things can go viral and go viral very quickly and be very negative. So you have to be listening and be on top of it, you know, and be proactive around it. So yeah, Emily's apology came too late, and she was obviously mortified. There was a huge statement, but you know, it was very damaging to them, and they've got to do a big job now in terms of rebuilding credibility. They did give free access to people for the streaming, and this would stop people using the codes that were causing the problem to do the streaming, but it was just too late for them. So what should they have done? They should have planned for unknown unknowns, had statements prepared, including sound bites to put on social, potentially having more robust technical support, because that was the issue. The codes didn't work, so they should have thought, okay, if codes don't work, what do we do? And have something in place around that. They should have apologised more quickly. They certainly need to do some follow-up PR to rebuild trust and credibility. So plan, be prepared, and revise your plan. Test it out at regular intervals. Have statements prepared. Don't forget about social. Short and snappy responses ready. Have access to technical help just in case you need it. Make sure you apologise. Don't put your head in the sand. You know, be upfront, respond quickly, and have a plan in place in terms of follow-up PR to rebuild your trust and credibility. And then I'll put a couple of slides in here how Annika can support your business. So we've got a dedicated PR and content team with a specific reputation management experience. We've got support from the whole of the business in terms of strategy and planning and analytics. So we can provide a sort of full suite of services to support you around reputation and planning. We've got really great tools in place for measurement and review. We can work really quickly as well. That's important at a time like this, and we can respond quickly and help you quickly. Often big organisations take quite a long time to kind of respond, but I think with Annika, we are really quick, so that's really important. And we're passionate about what we do. We've got a really joined up approach, and we deliver that total digital marketing services for a range of consumer and B2B businesses. Hi, Anne.
Hi. I wasn't sure whether it's going to make it, but 2 minutes.
Oh, well done. I think I dived through a couple of slides quickly, but I know everyone can download them afterwards. So
they can go and get them in the handouts, and also we will be issuing the video later.
Okay.
So, did you manage to answer all your questions?
I haven't answered any yet because I was just chatting through.
Okay, cool. So there's a couple of the QAA.
LDPR was good. Yeah, Colin the Caterpillar, that's been really well. I mean, that's played out both negatively and positively for both brands. And Aldi's very clever. I think their PR is good. They've done this time and time again. So I have lots of brands that are similar to other high street brands. But I think Colin the Caterpillar's captured the imagination of lots of people. I've seen even butchers making up naked caterpillars made out of like meat rolls and stuff. I mean, it really has gone viral. It's been very interesting. And actually, lots of interest for M&S. Obviously, people know who Colin the Caterpillar is now against Colin. I think, what is it? I can't remember. It's Cuthbert, I think, the Aldi one.
Yeah.
Crisis.
We had it for my birthday the other week.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I'm just scrolling up to see. Yes, yeah, it's true. It happens on a Friday night of the weekend. Yeah. Yeah.
Just before we go, because I know some people have to leave at exactly 10 o'clock. I've just got a little bit of an advert for next week's presentation, which is on social media and sports marketing. So Emil, who joined us recently, I think at the same time as you, Amy, actually.
He was, yeah.
He's a massive sports fan and has done lots of work in this area. And I think that's going to be fascinating because the way that pop culture and sport have all joined together and are fusing. So that's next week. So you'll get an email on that. And then finally, for anybody that's interested in saying thank you to Amy. So if you think that the presentation has been brilliant today, then please do leave us a little review. So you just click on there. I think it's gone up from there since last time. And if there's any more questions, Amy?
I couldn't see any really. I think there's one about its Annika crisis. But no, I think
not in PR. No. I mean, when we've had any issues, very rarely we have any issues with something not going quite right. We always are very magnanimous and will help the client out as much as possible and avoid any negative PR because we believe that you need to help the client. So, I've had to do a few things like give somebody a 3-month service over the years, but it's pretty rare, and most of the publicity we get has always been good. So we're very lucky, I think. Or we work very hard. We make our own luck. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Amy. I'm sorry I haven't been able to listen in. Obviously, I saw the slides, and there's been some lovely comments. So hopefully, everybody's got a lot out of that. And please do go and watch the video later. It's bank holiday weekend, and so have a great time, everybody. And thank you very much, Amy. See you next week.
Yeah. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.